Shoutouts today to Donica Elliott of Nashville and the PR firm Lucky Bird Media. Donica made planning for this episode as quick and easy as could be. Today we're going to talk about one of our favorite topics at the Shaping Opinion podcast, and that's music. But our focus in this episode will center on its power to heal. Our special guest is Ketch Secor of the band Old Crow Medicine Show. After you listen, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Send an email to tim@shapingopinion.com. If it's easier for you, get in touch on Twitter or Instagram at Shaping Opinion. If you want, we can give you a shout out. And as always, thank you for listening to the Shaping Opinion podcast. You're the reason we do this. This is Shaping Opinion, a production of O'Brien Communications. Would you describe what it was like when you came to the realization that Old Crow Medicine Show was going to have to suspend its live performances because of the pandemic?
Yeah, it was so emotional when the first gig got canceled, because in true Old Crow fashion, it was done in a really dramatic 11th hour kind of situation. We were scheduled to go overseas and had been for months, and the plane was leaving. I think by the time we finally pulled the plug, the plane was 3-4 hours away from departure. And this was a tour of Ireland with Darius Rucker. So interesting, we were going to go do the O2 Arena in Dublin, and then we were going to Glasgow and London. We had invested a lot of money in it. It was a really expensive trip, and nobody wanted to go. Everyone was scared. Nobody knew what was happening. And I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and, a good 2 weeks before, or not even, maybe 10 days before the first quarantines were put up and we canceled this gig, we had a cataclysmic tornado in our town. It also continued on throughout the state, where it also wreaked a lot of havoc. But I'm just 2 blocks away from total devastation that has not been dealt with since the quarantine. So there's still rubble right down the street and lots of destruction, probably $1 billion, maybe more. So we started this month already down, and yet I felt so optimistic through the experience of doing all this relief work, pulling up debris and visiting with people who've been without power for a week and all that I've faced the quarantine stuff rather with hopefulness and optimism. And losing that first gig, although it just was the domino. I've lost, dozens of gigs since then, and I'll continue to lose dates until my industry figures out when it's going to be open for business again. And, I've got a complicated relationship with that because, this is what I do for a living. But I'm so glad I was never going to take a break, ever. I've never spent a spring in which I wasn't going to play the festivals, going to play, trying to get the slot at Jazz Fest or Merle Fest or, Coachella out in California. I'm on a clock here, and it's hard to get off that clock. And the global pandemic has allowed me to finally take that break that I was never going to take after 22 years.
I'm Tim O'Brien. In this episode of the Shaping Opinion podcast, we're joined by Ketch Secor. He's the founder of the band Old Crow Medicine Show and a Grammy Award winner. And he's someone you can find these quarantine Saturday nights on YouTube as the host of the Heartland Hootenanny. The premise of our podcast is simple. We talk about people, events, and things that have shaped the way we think. In this episode, we'll talk with Ketch about his long journey in roots music, his band, a now iconic song that he co-wrote with Bob Dylan, and how the nation's COVID quarantine has created a new phenomenon, an explosion of live music on the internet. There's an old saying, March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb. This year, March came in like never before, and we're still feeling the effects. As the coronavirus started to spread around the world and take a foothold in the United States, the political season was in full swing at the start of the month of March. Super Tuesday, the day when the largest number of states held their primaries on the same day, was slated for March 3rd. What wasn't on the schedule that day was a natural disaster that hit Nashville and left a trail of devastation that no one could have expected. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get any worse, the entire nation went into various stages of quarantine in response to the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Ever since, the nation has faced a series of new challenges: lockdown, shuttered small businesses, stay-at-home orders, closed parks, closed restaurants and community centers, nursing homes and hospitals closed to visitors. The NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball, all placed their seasons on hold. Live entertainment came to a standstill. Music venues, large and small, the lights dimmed, the doors locked, the performers quiet. But people are funny in a resilient sort of way. They seem to find a way. So almost on cue, we started to see people make things happen in a new way. Jazz, pop, rock, old-time country music started to pop up with live performances on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. A natural disaster and a health pandemic could not silence the music. And for its part, the music has been doing what music does. It brings communities together to entertain, to provide an escape, to heal. One person at the center of all of this is Ketch Secor. He's the founder of the roots music band Old Crow Medicine Show, and he's been doing his part by creating brand new music in response to the disasters, and by creating a live stream like you've never seen. He calls it the Heartland Hootenanny.
Well, you're talking about really recent news, which I really appreciate. Thanks so much for bringing that up. The little projects that I've been doing since, I guess March 12th or something. The tornado was on Super Tuesday. I know it was about 10 days after that everything went crazy, or crazier as it were. I think that I always wanted to do TV. I mean, you kidding me? That's all I ever wanted to do. And not like famous TV, like, public access TV. That's what I wanted to do. I'm a subscriber to basic cable. I do not stream television. I don't know how to. I mean, I can't figure that stuff out. I still watch Channel 19. I watch so much footage of lousy TV in which there's like 2 camera angles. And so doing a quarantine TV show, I'm just set up for it. So it's a little bit like Wayne's World meets the Grand Ole Opry. And, I think I am kind of like that. Like I'm a little bit like Wayne or Garth Campbell, I think his name was, in that I don't really belong in country music, or I know a lot about country music and I authenticate country music. But, my parents weren't coal miners and they're not from West Virginia. I didn't grow up. I mean, I went to the Grand Ole Opry when I was 7 years old and I saw Minnie Pearl. But, Minnie Pearl was dressed up too. She masqueraded her whole life as a performer. I think what I am is a performer, and the vocational pursuit of my performance skill is through country music. That's what I picked. That's what opened. That's where the pathway led. But the thing that I really wanted to do was to be on the stage, and it was only when I was about like 12 or 13 that I realized that I could play music. Before that, what I really liked to do was to be in plays. I thought that being in plays was the greatest thing ever. And yet I never, I haven't been in plays since. The only TV I ever did was late night. And they never really put Old Crow on much late night TV anyway. We weren't on the radio. We weren't much on country music TV. So the Heartland Hootenanny, which is this really funny show that I'm just about to do my third episode of on Saturday night, is my idea of that's what I would do if somebody asked me what kind of TV show I would make. I would make a set that looked a lot like my fantasy of what my life would look like, what my office would look like when I was 25, a fantasy that I would have had when I was about 14. When you're in this line of work, you kind of professionally stay 14 or 25. You just sort of stay in the same space of, if you love these musicians, you're never going to stop loving them. If you idolize songs and hold that up in live performance, that piece never really goes away. So it just keeps you young. And I find that my youngest dreams are the ones that keep coming back. So it's not like I'm thinking of stuff now. I'm 41 years old this spring. I'm still it's the dreams that I had when I was 14 that I'm still, sifting through, more so than it is new dreams, new places I want to go. I'm still very interested in going to the Canadian Arctic. That's something I started thinking about when I was 16 years old, and I haven't done it yet. But it's, I'm less likely to find some new dream.
It's funny you say that you're fulfilling some dreams that you've had since you were a kid. I watched your live stream. I've watched a lot of live streams lately, and I've noticed that a lot of really good performers are not as comfortable without an audience, because you'll see these great performers and they'll even say on their live streams how they miss the feedback from an audience, that instant feedback they get from an audience. But you don't seem to have a problem with that, do you? You seem extremely energized from beginning to end of both of the episodes of your live stream that I've seen so far.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And thanks so much for watching. I mean, it's so fun, and I love getting to share it with people. And so thanks for helping me spread the word about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, hobos and tramps, cross-eyed mosquitoes and bow-legged ants, admission is free. Y'all pay at the door. Pull up a chair and sit on the floor. Welcome now, children, grandchildren, great-granny. It's time for the inaugural episode of the Heartland Hootenanny. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Crow's Nest here at Heartland Studios on Hart Lane in East Nashville, Tennessee, USA. I'm Ketch Secor of Old Crow Medicine Show, and you're watching a brand new show which already happens to be the most exciting hour of live stream entertainment you've ever seen, from one man, one banjo, and one Victrola under quarantine. Yes, it's been...
The ways that I'm engaged as an artist through quarantine are the ways that I'm surviving, and not even the ways that I'm thriving. I feel like a lot of us are like houseplants right now, and some of us are really close to the window. And I'm like practically busting out of the house. I'm so close to the window.
I think there's something interesting about your approach, and it goes back to your roots, your own roots. And that is, you are for the most part, you're a one-man show. You have a guest on each episode, but you're a one-man show, and you go from one thing to the next, and it's almost like watching a production with a single take for 1 hour, and with the aid of your baseball bat to move the camera. But you were a busker when you started out. Are you borrowing on your skills you learned as a busker when you do this?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I've been borrowing for my busking skill for 22 years. And that's what I was doing 22 years ago. I mean, that's when Old Crow started, was the fall of '98. But even before then, the first time I ever played on a street corner, I was 15 years old, and it was in Chicago outside of Soldiers Field. I had a 12-hour layover before I caught the Amtrak westbound, because I was going out to Seattle, oh my God, to work on a commune with girls that wore their hair in braids and lived in teepees. Oh man, it was a thrill. From a poultry processing town in Virginia, getting on an Amtrak train, making a layover connection at Union Station in Chicago. And then I had a guitar with me, although I think at that time I could already play banjo. But I remember busking with a guitar and making like $23 and buying a carton of generic cigarettes and getting back on the Amtrak and feeling like Lewis and Clark, sort of in combination.
You found a way to make money doing what you love.
The busking thing is sort of the secret weapon of my band, and my own relationship to the stage is largely from having been out on the curb. And when you're on the curb, and I've busked in the subways in New York, and I busked in New Orleans, and I busked in Pike's Market in Seattle and Vancouver, and I've played all across Canada. I've done a lot of street corner playing, and that was just the proving grounds for me, because when you do that, you're in charge. You're completely responsible. Your self-agency is so strong, because if they walk by, it's because you let them. If they don't tip you, it's because you didn't beg enough, or you didn't do the thing that made the ka-ching happen. And when the ka-ching happened, it's the ultimate feeling of validation, is the coin. It's the coin toss. That's why playing in Canada was so much more fun, because there was an actual clink because of that beautiful $1 coin and $2 coin that is ubiquitous. That's, they don't use paper money for bucks and $2. And so when you get thrown that coin, it's so great. As a performer in a live stream, I'm not watching like comments fly by, but I know that if I were able to see that, it would feel like a tip. But I'm glad it's not there. To me, the Heartland Hootenanny is sort of like a recitation in front of, I know you all can see me, but I can't see you. And so I'm just being the zaniest me I can be. And it feels so good. Like somebody told me I should cut it down to half an hour. And I'm like, no, I want to go all day.
Now, back to our News on Parade segment. Let's go ahead and take a peek into the Pan American mailbag here on the Heartland Hootenanny. I've got it right here. Okay, it's that wonderful time where we read through your cards and letters, and we hear from some of the folks who love the Hootenanny and tune us in on Saturday night. Let's see what's in the old Pan Am box today. Okay, let's see. Here's one from Skirt Dog 5, who writes, at SC Believin', do you checkin' this? Here's one. Jill _74 writes, heart, purple heart, blue heart. Thanks, Jill.
I wanted to ask you, this obviously is a way to connect with your existing fans, people that might have been looking forward to a show with you, even in places like Dublin, Ireland, can watch this. But you also have this opportunity to connect with new fans. What have you heard? Have you seen anything so far about what this live stream has done for your fan base, your new and existing?
Well, I only got a smartphone for Christmas this year. And so the ways that I've been related to my fans has been a lot more like out by the bus, or, I'm the one that answers the actual mail. And then for years, I was always the guy that did the emails back and forth with the band. But then when we got management, like 12 years ago or something, a long time ago, I stopped really doing it. And then I never used social media because I never had a smartphone. And me not having a smartphone for a really long time was an important experiment in completely existing in the present realm and not, and so now that I'm doing it, I think it's making the Heartland Hootenanny even more zany, because I feel a little bit, intoxicated by the whole thing. The first thing I did after Christmas was, I got my new smartphone, right? And it takes video, and you can upload that video onto your social media platform. Now, Old Crow always had that stuff. We always had Facebook and all that stuff, but I didn't know how to work it, so I wasn't trying to work it. And instead, I was, talking with people out by the bus, and that's I'm really engaged with the audience. You just have to get to me to be engaged with me personally, but I'm super approachable once you find me. And I'm like, I'm a really public person. I'm not, I don't like hole up in the hotel. If I'm playing in Pittsburgh, I'm walking all over town. I'm crossing the bridges. I might cross 3 bridges in a day just before sound check if I'm playing a gig in Pittsburgh. I love being out there with everybody. But anyway, the first thing I did when I got a smartphone was I went to the Waffle House and I put on a Santa Claus suit and I went and played banjo in a homeless camp. And I made a little video of it with me singing with an alcoholic guy that, had one suit of clothes, and us singing fa la 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 la. I mean, it was beautiful. And I just felt like, oh man, I've been missing out. And I've got a new kind of voice, and there's a new kind of me that can go out there and spread joy. Because that's really the jam. That's all I'm really trying to do. That's all I really tried to do in the first place. I just want to get out there and be the light.
That thing that you mentioned about putting on the Santa Claus suit and doing that, I know from just reading about you that that's not shtick. That's not something you have talked about, going out and performing in nursing homes and in elementary schools. And as you said, with homeless shelters, you will take your free time and do this when nobody's around. You don't do this for publicity and for other people's smartphones. Could you describe your philosophy around that?
Yeah, well, thanks. I've always been that way. I started playing music when I was a kid, and the first songs I ever played were songs from the civil rights movement, which, I'm from the 80s, y'all, and I'm from the suburbs. I don't know why I was singing songs that were sung on your way out of jail for civil disobedient acts 25 years before. I mean, my parents didn't do that stuff. My parents were not freedom writers. I mean, they listened to Motown music. They were pretty hip, but they were even too young for that. So, and I didn't grow up in a time in which I could have gotten on a Greyhound bus and gone to Selma, Alabama, and sung a song that could have got me spit on or anything like that. I grew up, with like record stores and stealing cigarettes from the drugstore, to go then steal records from the record store, to go then smoke cigarettes and listen to music. That was the best thing that was going to happen to me. And so I don't know where the social bent of, wanting to be on the front lines or an agent of change with music, but I know I listened to a lot of Pete Seeger when I was a kid, and I felt that I was supposed to do something like that. And years later, I met Pete Seeger, and just being around him, I just felt like I was like with an angel. It was so great. I mean, and a lot of the musicians that I've gotten to be around, like Willie Nelson or Doc Watson or Merle Haggard, or this funny relationship that I have with just sort of this dreamscape of a Bob Dylan, who's not somebody I've ever met, but somebody I have this powerful thing I share with. I mean, all of the ways that I relate to these older music types feel really angelic to me, feel really divine, like part of like I'm getting to be around the gods.
The comment you made about Bob Dylan, I am not going to let that go. I know that I've heard some of the story behind that, and I won't let that go. But I did want to ask you before we get there, you are now doing this live stream, and it kind of branches off of the work that you've been doing to help Nashville recover from the tornadoes. There's a theme there, and that is you're helping build a community, and you're also helping a nation, in this case, a nation, through in some small way through your live stream. It's part of the healing process. You're using music to help people deal with this adversity and maybe this uncertainty.
Well, building community is really what it's all about. I mean, that's what you're trying to do as a busker. You're trying to make a community. I mean, it's a pioneering event. You're going out there, you're going to put your stake in the ground. You're going to say, this is mine, join me. Because I never wanted it to be mine. I wanted it to be us. I want to be the first charge of the magnet, but the magnetism happens. I'm a recipient of the same gift that everybody else is that's listening to my music. We're all sharing a gift. It's beautiful. But really the ways that I've been building community lately that have been the most significant have actually been right up the street here where I started the school. And I'm constantly engaged with my Episcopal School of Nashville community, and I'm the chairman of the board of a nonprofit that has been hit hard by the pandemic's resulting destruction of the economy. It's a little private school in its fourth year of operations. We got 70 kids, so I'm doing a live stream for the kids, and I'm reading my children's book to the library Facebook group here in Nashville. And I checked in yesterday morning with a nursing home that I play at up in a marginalized community over by the prisons, which is a largely African-American nursing home community called Bordeaux Long-Term Care. And they've had some COVID cases. And I just think that the work that musicians can do right now is vital, and that building community is the antidote. And you can do it in isolation. I mean, we're doing it right now.
the common thread, whether it's that or whether it's what you're doing on YouTube or what other musicians are doing on Facebook, it's this connectedness between themselves and their fans, and in a different way, they're fans in each other.
Yeah, I mean, we all have a part to play in this. You know, this is a unifying force. It's when has there been another time in recent memory when the entire globe was confronted with the same situation? And so some of us are going to be, everybody needs to be a light for somebody else. And you can decide your wattage, or something more divine than you, some greater power might have already decided your wattage. But we're all burning bright for somebody else.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit and come back to that comment you made earlier about Bob Dylan and the fact that you never met him. And for background, because some people may not be aware of this, you were probably best known for writing Wagon Wheel, the song Wagon Wheel, and you co-wrote that with Bob Dylan. But could you tell us first off, how did you co-write a song with Bob Dylan and not having ever met him, even to this day?
Well, co-write's got a couple of parentheses around it because it means in quotation marks, because there's like 26 years in between the pen strokes on the song. You know, I basically dusted off an old unreleased Bob Dylan bootleg and turned it into a really popular and now famous song. And it's just been incredible. I can't believe how popular it's gotten. It's so cool. It's one of the greatest things that I ever could have dreamed, was that my little high school journal entry song that I wrote so that I could go sing it in the church for the great, we had this reverend who we called Reverend Bobby Thompson is his name. He's probably still rocking and rolling somewhere. He was from Bluefield, West Virginia. And he was African-American, and he grew up in this great Black tradition of coal mining families in West Virginia, particularly in South, like Beckley down to Bluefield. Always had, a strong Black population, and there's some HBCs in that state. Anyway, he was this enormous figure at my boarding school called Phillips Exeter Academy. And he had a gig. On Sunday nights, he had this sort of non-denominational church service with readings by Frederick Buechner, and then maybe from the, Bhagavad Gita, and then one of the kids from from a foreign culture, because it was a school with lots of kids from around the world, would talk about some other spiritual angle of their upbringing. I wanted to sing in that church so bad. You did it in the dark, right? And it was one of the only ways that you could get out of your dorm after hours was by, and you could bring a date to it too. So it was great. You got to stay up till 9:00, basically there's a monastic vibe to my high school. Prep schools are funny places. And I was from the South, and I wrote this song about pining for the South and about a girl I had kissed in an elevator. And I wrote it for this dude because I wanted to play at the church. And then I sang it, and I thought, oh, that's a really good song. It's almost like I just sort of backed into it accidentally, and we just fit. And so I finished this old Bob song. And then years later, before I ever went to try and publish it, then I was like 24 and living in Nashville. And, when I came here, I wasn't even interested in, I didn't even play it. I was so into traditional music that I thought that it was important for me not to play original materials. And so a lot of the ethos around the early Old Crow Medicine show was pretty, ideological in this rigidity of, we're going to play traditional American fiddle dance music, and that's it. And so it's beautiful that years later, when the song got really popular, now the song is contextualized as part of the American folk tradition. And that's a beautiful thing. That's really, really rewarding to me. And really, I feel much closer to Pete Seeger because of it.
You wrote the song when you were 17, but you didn't publish it till you were in your mid-20s and you were in Nashville. And one question that I really never saw the answer to was, how did you get Bob Dylan's attention to get when you wanted to go to that next step and get the thing published and go through the process of making it official, even though you never met him? How did you get his attention?
Well, I think that's where there was some divine luck. I mean, there must have been something that was some force that was saying the song must be made, because I don't know. It seems so improbable now that at that age, with the help of some basic management assistance, that I could get a message to Bob and that Bob would agree and that lawyers would discuss this and that a 50 percentage point would be decided upon. But one thing that is really interesting that did happen in that time is that when we got in touch with Bob Dylan's management company, we heard back from Bob's publisher saying, Bob says he didn't write that song. He says that he learned it from Arthur Crudup. And Arthur Crudup was a guy we had a moniker called Big Boy. So Arthur Big Boy Crudup was from Memphis, and he wrote and recorded a song before Elvis got it. That's all right, mama, that's all right for you. So he's the original That's All Right, Mama, which becomes Elvis's big hit. In the liner notes to That's All Right, Mama, or to his song Rock Me Baby, which must have been what Bob was saying, because there's nothing called Rock Me Mama or Wagon Wheel in Big Boy's catalog, but there's a Rock Me Baby. Which, it doesn't say anything about a southbound train or a wagon wheel, but, maybe Bob was ripping that off. He's something of a Cheshire spirit, right? And always the music trickster, Bob Dylan is. But in the liner notes to the Big Boy Crudup song, Big Boy says, I didn't write this song. I learned it from Big Bill Brunsey. So Big Bill Brunsey, a generation earlier, is a Mississippian who moves to Chicago in the Black Migration of the World War I era. And then he establishes himself as a really successful early recording artist in the 1920s on Columbia Records, playing with great big bands. And he does a version of this Rock Me Baby that he gives to Big Boy through some osmosis. And then Bob finds it, and then I find it, and then Darius finds it. And then 100 years later, it goes number one. And in its, this century-long gestation, it sees shared authorship and interpretation among these three African Americans and America's greatest songwriter, this Jewish musical icon, and then me, the kid at the prep school in New Hampshire.
You wrote it, you're getting credit for it, and your partner is Bob Dylan, and it's one of the most successful country songs of all time. Do you ever step back and just feel that that's a surreal feeling?
Not really, because it's my story. I mean, that's how it is. I remember feeling really lucky that day, walking home with this chorus in my mind and like racing up into my room and jotting it down real quick. I just felt like a kinetic feeling in the air. It was New Hampshire in the fall, and the falls up in New England are so incredible, the way that the light and the leaves play with the air temperature, and the way that there can be these little like bursts of heat that happen in the cold. I just felt like there's a spirit to all these places that I've traveled to do the work that I do, and I know that it's I've that feeling of luckiness or a charm. It never left me. I mean, I felt that way when I was really little, and I still feel it now. So, it's surprising that with the superlatives of it, because I never really felt like I was going to be famous. And I really don't feel very famous at all. It's great. Like I don't get recognized or nobody. It's not like that at all. It's not like I'm Bob Dylan. It's not like I'm even like a country star from the radio. Like I'm not on TV or nothing. It's so great. I get to be in the space that's right for me, because I believe in Pete Seeger, and country music doesn't never laid claim to Woody Guthrie, for example. Like country didn't lay claim to Woody Guthrie. And that's all right. And I'm not Woody Guthrie because like I say, I'm not famous, but people like that, the sort of outsiders are where I like to be. I think a lot about John Prine. especially right now, I'm so sad about John Prine being gone. But I'm also just so glad that I got to know him and play music with him and be in his presence and you know feel the warmth of his this of the light that he casts.
Well, you played two of his songs on your live stream. You played one of his songs on each of your first two episodes, and I think the first time was right after he passed, and so it was, for anyone that's a fan of John Prine, you could see the emotion in that performance. What do you draw from John Prine, not only in your songwriting but in your life?
Well, I got to be, I got to spend time with John and work gigs with him. John was somebody who lived in Nashville. I remember when I first heard John Prine, I thought, oh, he's probably dead. It was that first album. It was an album I had never seen before. Nobody had ever mentioned John Prine to me. I was 17 years old. I hadn't yet written Rock Me Mama, but I had discovered this John Prine record, Bruised Orange or something. That's what it was. And I thought, oh, surely it's like Jesse Winchester or somebody from I just didn't realize that he was a cultural icon when I was a kid. And then I definitely didn't realize when I got to Nashville that John Prine lived in Nashville and that this is the town. And then when I got to know Cowboy Jack Clement, I didn't know that Jack had been John Prine's producer. And so I've been thinking a lot about Cowboy Jack Clement, who was so great, man. He was from South Haven, Mississippi. His father was a Bible salesman. He was the recording engineer for Sam Phillips at Sun Studios. And he's the guy that put the horns on. He was like, well, here's one great thing he did. He's like, hey, Jerry Lee, you got anything else, man? How about that thing you were just singing over by the water cooler that went, like a whole lot of shaking or whatever? Oh, why don't you try that, man? And then Jerry's like, okay. And so Jerry, for the first time in the sessions, Jerry Lewis stops playing these torch ballads that the crooners like Gene Austin taught him on records that he thinks are what he's supposed to sound like. And instead he begins to play barrel house piano and sing a whole lot of shaking going on. So, I mean, it's like getting to be around Jackie Robinson, like getting to be around John Prine and around Cowboy Jack is like, you might as well, Elvis might as well have been in the other room.
You had an experience that you talk about with John Prine. I don't think John Prine remembers it because it doesn't sound like you talk to each other, but it was you going to a breakfast place in Nashville and you ordered a certain breakfast. I think it was meatloaf.
Yeah. I had just turned 30 and I went to this soul food restaurant that I like to go to up in North Nashville. And it's right next to the Bruton Snuff Factory. So it really smells like Copenhagen, all the air. Like you can get a buzz and feel a little nauseous just walking to this restaurant because you got to go through the fumes of where they make the smokeless chewing tobacco. Anyway, so I get there and I order the meatloaf and shoe peg corn and turnip greens and chow chow. And I sit down and I get hot water cornbread and I'm happy it's my birthday. I'm going to eat this huge lunch and then go take a nap. I'm 30. I'm living in Nashville. I got a song that's sort of popular and seems to be getting really popular and a successful band. And then in walks John Prine. It's so great. It's like it was meant to be. But just like Bob Dylan, I'm not going to make, I don't want to interrupt him. It's okay that I don't meet him. I don't need to give him my business card. I'm just glad to be in the same space as him. There he is. And I look at him and smile. And I give him the kind of smile that's like, I know who you are. But then I look down at his plate and he's ordered the exact same thing as me. Meatloaf, shoe peg corn, turnip greens, and chow chow, and hot water cornbread. And that was so affirming to me. It was just like a beautiful little plate, miraculous lunch. And then I got up and I waved goodbye and I walked away and I just felt his blessing.
And it wouldn't be much longer before you would be opening shows for him.
Yeah. And, it's like a lot of people, they they come into my life in funny ways, or I come into theirs. There's an intersection. And, I think it's really special when I worship these people. They're angels on earth to me. I don't really worship them, but I feel that we are all in worship of the same gods, and that those gods are, powerfully fantastic, otherworldly, beings that bless, like Jackie Robinson, like Pete Seeger, people that make you want to dream a really expansive dream, and on whose shoulders you feel that you are standing just to reach a little bit further. And maybe, you'll never be Neil Armstrong, but there's something about this line of work in the music business that is a little bit like walking on the moon for the first time. Rock and roll is so cool. America's popular music and the contribution of American popular music to the world is one of the great and most spectacular things about being human, is the music that we make. It's just so damn good when it's good. And if you love it like I love it, and you're passionate like I am about the kinds of music that I'm passionate about, and then can go live a life based on that passion, sort of governed and by that passion that I feel, and then get to go live around all the people that I love and admire. It's really an astounding gift to get to live this way. Yeah, amen to that.
I think anyone that's listening to this episode can tell that you have this passion for the history of country music, and not just the history of country music, but as it's called now, roots music. It goes all the way back, and you had this passion for music from the 19th century when you were a young high school person, and now bringing this back to 2019 because you were able to tap your own appreciation for the history of country music and its lineage last year when Ken Burns produced and introduced his documentary on country music. And I had the chance to watch all of the episodes, and I've seen all of Ken Burns' documentaries, but I have to say, next to the Civil War documentary, this is probably his best work in my opinion. But you played a role in that. You weren't just a talking head for that. Ken Burns turned to you as an advisor and a historical consultant. What was that like working on that project?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up now because it's just like running into John Prine on my 30th birthday, and then a couple years later working with him. I had this thing for Ken Burns when I was young. I mean, this one is a little less in the present, but when I was a kid, man, that Civil War documentary was so important to me. I was 12 years old. I'd seen the Ken Burns documentary, The Civil War. I grew up in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, so what was so powerful about the movie was that it really helped me to understand better where I lived. I went away to prep school in New Hampshire, but if I had gone to the high school in my town, I would have gone to Robert E. Lee High. I would have played Stonewall Jackson High in the basketball games, and played football against Turner Ashby High. The war was, I lived right next to the Newmarket battlefield, and all of those photographs, those mountains were the mountains that I grew up in. And so I really felt a great affinity for Ken Burns. And then a couple years later, when I went away to school, I found that if I told the directors of admissions about how I had seen the whole Ken Burns movie and that I had had this epiphany about where I was from, they all thought I was really smart when I said that. And so the story grew because, I really had only seen like one episode. But by the time I had gone through the boarding schools of New England, I was an expert, and I had written letters, and my tale just grew taller and taller. And then I got into the best prep school in the country, and I totally told him that story. Anyway, years flashed by, and then Ken Burns came back in that one of the very first gigs that paid Old Crow Medicine Show was to go play Hampshire College. And that's where Ken got his filmmaking chops. And that's also where Dayton Duncan, who wrote the country music film, went to school and met Ken Burns. And so I always felt like that was an important part of it too. And then it was so funny. I was at the Ryman Auditorium for the Americana Music Awards in the year 2011 or 9 or 10. And my mother was my date. And we went to the backstage area and somebody said, hey, I'm looking to find Ketch Secor. I work with Ken Burns. And Ken Burns was in Nashville and he reached out to me because I don't know, maybe Marty Stewart had said I was somebody who could articulate early country music well. So anyway, and since then I've been an advisor to the film. I've spent time in Walpole, New Hampshire. I know the team. I've been on bus tours with Ken, and we've gone out and promoted the movie together, and with Dayton Duncan, who's a great pal now. And I love Florentine films. I love Ken Burns. I love everything he stands for. I think he's such a great American. I hold him in such high esteem. And the stories that he tells, the ones that he chooses, they're everything that I believe America to be. And every story is an American story, whether it's the West, a 20-hour movie called The West, or whether it's a 2-hour movie called The Brooklyn Bridge. He distills the hopes and dreams of Americans, both in the middle and the disenfranchised. He is such a powerful agent of change. My God, love that Ken Burns. What a thrill to get to know him.
Well, that's a formal way that you've done it, but it seems like this comes naturally to you, because I know of another story that you've talked about, has nothing to do with the Ken Burns documentary, but it's your curious nature, I think. And that is when you were in North Carolina. And so let's go back to your career now. You were a busker, you were in New York State, you did some busking in Canada, and you and the group settle in North Carolina, and you start really digging into the history of music, of American music. And you have a story about a 90-year-old blind man in the backwoods of North Carolina. And when I heard that story, I thought, this is just an ingrained passion in you to learn about this. There's no other way to justify why you would seek this person out and go to the backwoods and talk to this guy. Could you tell us about that 90-year-old man and what you learned from him?
Well, sure. Thanks for asking about. The guy you're talking about was a guy named Arlie Presnell. Where we lived, and Arlie's really just one of the squares of a quilt that is the 2 years that Old Crow Medicine Show in 1999 and 8 and part of 2000 lived in this corner of the state where Tennessee and Virginia and North Carolina come together. And we met just a dozen people like Arlie Presnell, and we met Doc Watson and got our big break and ended up going to Nashville. It was such a wonderful time to be living in Appalachia and being so interested in traditional music, and also just so in love with the American people, because the people that we encountered were unlike any other Americans I knew from any other place. There were so many old and wonderful people who were living with older, life folk pathways as their track. And so we would work in the tobacco fields, and they would measure their fields with an iron chain that was on this link. Like they would open it up and it would uncoil, and then they and their kin would walk a really long way and measure it in lengths and poles. It's just things like that. Like I didn't go to college, and I know if I'd gone to college, I would have learned how to use a computer. But instead, I went to Appalachia and I learned how to measure a tobacco field in lengths and poles, which is like 19th century, I think, like river captain type stuff. The only other place I learned about lengths and poles and fathoms is in, from John Hartford music and the songs of the Mississippi River. Mark Twain, lead lines. There was just a lot of really colorful characters. Another thing that we did when we were kids was living back there, we planted by the lunar signs. because you get those old timey calendars from the seed mill, and they tell you to plant beans in the arms, and every different phase of the moon was associated with a different zodiological sign. And one of the most validating things that ever happened to me in my young career was the garden that we grew, and the old folks coming by our little, flop house where 7 of us guys were all living like some kind of back to the land monastery with banjos and fiddles. And these old folks leaning out of their truck window saying, "Them's the prettiest beans we've ever seen this early."
And that's a high compliment.
Yeah, man, having the best beans, it was really it was great. So this guy Arlie Presnell you're asking about, he is one of these wily characters we crossed paths with, and he was a blind guy who had all of these ropes all around his property that he would follow to get to the different places. And he talked a lot about the Cherokee people in Indian lore, and he was a singer, and he sang a couple of ballads for me. I never learned that ballad except for the show. I wanted to tell that story, and I had never learned the song he sang, just a snippet of. He sang it so quiet, and I turned to the guy because I'd never heard the song before, and he said, "I think that was Little Moses," and it just felt like a Rosetta Stone to me to hear that it was Little Moses by the Carter Family. And yet I never learned to sing that song until last week when I wrote that part for the show. And that's just another example of me living the dreams of my teenage years here in my 40s. I mean, I'm finally following through on information that I gathered when I was 18 years old.
Well, I know you're enjoying it, and you do so much of this for yourself, and you've found a way to blend doing things that make you feel good with doing important things for others. And one of those things that you've done, and we've already talked about it somewhat, and that is your work to help the people in Nashville after the tornadoes hit. And can you tell us a little bit about that song that you wrote? And I really want people to know how to access it, because it's for a good purpose.
Yeah, I'd love to, and thanks for asking about it. So this was right after the tornadoes came through. I mean, I had, me and my little kids. I got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I'm divorced, and I have the kids half the time, and my parents don't live here, and I don't have a nurse or a nanny or a girlfriend who lives with me. So it's just me and the kids. It's really intense. And that's been a really intense part of my life in the past couple of years, is going through a divorce and just not seeing it coming, and then bringing the kids up in the middle of it. So one of the things that's been super intense is, oh man, quarantine, little kids, running a homeschool, and then this tornado. And so having new music has been a really, really important way to get right, to get feeling good. The night that the tornadoes hit, my daughter woke me up, and I had just gotten in off the road the day before, and I just hadn't slept. And it was the first tour of the year, that tour in February. Oh, and we sounded so good too. And I look back on that tour, and I see now how wonderful it was. Just the privilege of getting to go out and play now that we can't. And I felt so hopeful about the whole year. I mean, the gigs that we had on the calendar this year, because we're in year 22 and it's a rebuild, and it's a funny, and life has thrown me, like I say, I've been through this painful divorce. Life has thrown considerable tumult my way. And so I'm learning and adapting, and the band is adapting. And now I'm, Critter just left. So now I'm the last original member of the band. I'm the last guy in the band who went to Arlie Presnell's house and heard Little Moses or measured something in lengths and poles. I'm the last guy in the band who remembers what that bean crop was like the summer of 1999. Anyway, this is my long-winded way of saying, hey, I wrote a new song, and it generates money for the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee and its Emergency Relief Fund. It's a song called Nashville Rising, and it celebrates the kind of spirit that I saw after the Super Tuesday tornadoes, and commemorates that spirit and lifts it up as a light in the times of the COVID-19 pandemic and its subsequent crisis, because Nashville has already been through something ahead of this that gave us an early on boost of community spirit and unity, togetherness. We loved one another through a challenge 10 days before the quarantines came down.
They say the spring marches in like a lion. And look at that wildcat win a touchdown. All of it's ruin, rubble, and rain. That's troubling for Nashville, my hometown. But ain't we gonna rise? Nashville rising.
And so this song, which I wrote and recorded, largely remotely and in quarantine, and made a video for, which my kids helped make with lots of cell phone videos of me just driving around the neighborhood. Because I'm 2 blocks away from a big pile of broken glass and rubble. 2 blocks. So check out this song, download it, watch the video, share it with your friends. Help us raise money for relief in Nashville, and let the bright light of positivity that is the message of this song. Let it affect you, and if you're a singer, go sing it. Go sing it on your live stream. Go sing it on your virtual happy hour, or tell your pals about it. Help me spread the word. But whether you're spreading the word about Heartland Hootenanny, or Old Crow Medicine Show, or Rock Me Mama Like a Wagon Wheel, or Nashville Rising, just spread a good word. It doesn't have to be mine. Spread any good word you can think of. Spread good cheer, y'all. If you're listening and you're tuned in right now and you're living in the quarantine time, spread good cheer. It's my message to you. It's the message that I'm hearing every day. A thundering voice saying, Ketch, spread good cheer. So I tell you, go spread it. Let's all spread it.
Well, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, because you seem to be on a roll, and we're talking days and weeks, not even months, where we have the tornado and we have the quarantine, and so much is happening in such a fast pace of time. People may not realize that because the time goes slower when you're quarantined. But in the span of less than about a month and a half, 6 weeks, and this is just one example, you have written and produced a song like Nashville Rising, which, if anyone would listen to it, they would hear a very commercially viable song. And then you produced another song since then, and it's about the coronavirus. And it was, I think, one of those things where there was a call for songwriting and creative work from the UN. So you wrote another song called UN Medicine Man, which is another good song. In a span of a short period of time, you've produced 2 very good songs, and they're both for the world. They weren't created for commercial purposes.
And I'm so glad you brought them up, and thanks for letting me grin ear to ear about that, because I've been writing, and I was feeling pretty creative before this too. But I wanted to tell you, I got a new one, and I just filmed the video for it 2 days ago in my house with my Bat camera. And it's a video. It's a song called "I'd Like to Kiss You, But I'm Quarantined." Oh, and it's really funny. I made this video with me and a whole bunch of gas masks, and wearing like 4 different pairs of my grandfather's Lilly Pulitzer pants and jackets, many of which are not matching, and all straw hats. It's been so fun wearing all of my grandfather's name was Jefferson Davis Robinson. He was from Toledo, Ohio, and he had a hell of a collection of Lilly Pulitzer pants and resort wear. So you'll want to see this video. It's my newest self-quarantine video, and it reeks of the kind of self-isolation that can make you crazy enough to want to do something really zany. And it'll be featured on an upcoming episode of Heartland Hootenanny.
Well, in the spirit of Heartland Hootenanny, I don't want to let this episode go by without me asking you some questions. The first question for you, Ketch, is what is your favorite topping on a hot dog?
All right. It's definitely sauerkraut and tons of mustard. I mean, it is swimming in mustard. Like, I don't want a sea bun. I just want a pool.
Okay. And who is your dream celebrity quarantine roommate?
Oh my God. I love that question. I've been asking that question, and I don't know. I now that you're asking me, I think I'm having a hard time deciding between Kathleen Turner and Catherine Deneuve.
One final question for you. As soon as this quarantine is lifted, what is the very first thing you will do?
I think I'm going to take my kids to Disney World, but don't tell them.
They probably aren't listening. Ketch Secor, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Mr. O'Brien, and everybody listening. God bless and peace be with you all. And I hope to see you in person really soon. Take care.
I got a job to do, I got a mountain to move, and it's an uphill climb. But all I need to use is my head, and these blues will be far behind. 'Cause I'm the UN medicine man. I need you to help me stop the spread.
To learn more about Ketch Secor, Old Crow Medicine Show, their single Nashville Rising, and the Heartland Hootenanny, please see our show notes at shapingopinion.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please help others find it. Leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. On Twitter, just tweet to us at Shaping Opinion, or you can get in touch with us through our website, shapingopinion.com. We have a Facebook page, and we're on Instagram at Shaping Opinion. Shaping Opinion is a production of O'Brien Communications. This is where we talk about people, events, and things that have shaped the way we think. Until next time, I'm Tim O'Brien.
I'm just doing my job, trying to cover